今天我来给你讲讲中文口语和书面语有啥不一样，还有就是在现实生活中怎么用。Now, both styles of speaking, formal and informal, are extremely useful and common, but as a learner, it's tough to know what counts as formal or informal and when each is appropriate to use. Now, when communicating with regular Chinese people in regular situations, you'll probably want to speak more casually, but when speaking to someone older than you or of a higher status, or maybe strangers you're meeting for the first time, in-laws, bosses, people in authority, such as policemen, government officials, etc., you'll want to speak a little bit more formally, and perhaps more importantly, you'll want to be able to understand when they speak more formally. Now, as a learner, it can be intimidating knowing the difference between casual and formal Chinese, when to use which, but it's not as hard as it sounds to get the hang of this. Most of the time, it's simply a matter of avoiding using certain words in certain situations. So in a more formal situation, you want to avoid using super casual words, and vice versa. In a more casual situation, you want to try and avoid the particularly posh sounding or formal sounding words. So let's start with what keywords to use if you want to sound casual in Chinese, or the casual words to avoid in more formal situations. This first group of words that make you sound more casual are what I call filler words. So when you're in normal everyday spoken conversation, you'll throw in a bunch of these words, and they'll not only sound really casual, they'll also give you a few extra moments to think of what to say next. So here we have the beginning of a short dialogue, someone telling something about what happened to them recently, and I'm going to just show you the filler words that you can use and add in to make yourself sound more casual. So this person could just say, 我跟你说个事儿. 我跟你说个事儿. That means I've got something to tell you. I've got to tell you something. But what they've done instead is said 那个. That's literally that in Chinese, but it's a way of saying, well, you know. And then we have 怎么说呢, which means how to say or how to put this. That's also great when you're actually looking for the right words, like when your language is not so good and you're trying to think of words to actually say, or, you can think of the words, but you're thinking of the right way to put it. And then 这个, which is very similar to 那个, it's or like, just adding a bit of time there for you. And is kind of or so when you add these all together, you're giving yourself a lot of extra time and you sound fine. You sound a bit more casual. So let's continue on the story. 就是 here is another way of saying sort of, well, and then 嘛 at the end. 就是昨天嘛. Here, they're saying yesterday. 昨天 means yesterday. This word in the middle here. But adding 就是 and 嘛 is like saying, well, yesterday, 就是昨天嘛。我和他去超市买东西. I went to buy something at the supermarket with him or her. 然后呢? Now this 然后呢 means and then in Chinese, which is a literal meaning, right? Just for communicating in general. But it's often used as a way of saying like or or well while you're saying stuff. So it's a good way to break it up. 然后呢? And then 买完东西忘记付款了. 买完东西忘记付款了. After I bought my stuff, I forgot to pay. And then the speaker adds another little filler word here. 就是说 is kind of like so, just another filler word. 当时 at that time 买东西没给钱就走了. I left without paying. 结果后来被发现了. And in the end, I was discovered. 那个, there's that 那个 again. 还好这是一场误会. 还好, it's good that. 只是一场误会. It was a misunderstanding. So remember those filler words and throw those in conversation when you can. 那个, 这个, 然后就是说 and 怎么说呢 are all fantastic to use. Now there are some other words that just genuinely are casual in nature and are used all the time. Let's go through a few of them right now. 弄 is a word that means to do, and it could also mean prepare or to disturb, depending on how it's used. It's used in combination with a bunch of other characters in a casual way. So, for example, you could say in a more either neutral or slightly more formal way, we prepared some food. 我们准备了一些食物. Now, 食物 is also a more formal way of saying food. The far more casual way to say it would be 我们弄了一些吃的. 吃的 is the more casual way, and 弄 in this situation means to prepare some food. 弄坏 means broken something, as opposed to 破坏, which is the more formal way of saying it. And you could say 你理解这道题了吗? Which means, do you comprehend the problem? Whereas you could just say 弄明白. 弄 as in to do, 明白 understand. 弄明白 is a more casual way of expressing the idea of understand. 弄 can also be to disturb or annoy someone. So you could say 不要打扰我, as in don't disturb me. 我现在忙, I'm busy. Or you could say 别弄我, 我在忙. Don't disturb me, I'm busy. It's the same exact meaning, but it's a super casual way of expressing it. We can also say, instead of 丢失 or 遗失, which are more formal or at least neutral ways of expressing to lose something, you could just say 弄丢. 弄丢, 坐高铁, 东西弄丢了, 不要慌. Don't panic if you lose something on the high-speed train. So 弄, really good one to use if you want to sound more casual. And another one you can use is 搞, which also kind of means to do, but it can also mean to fix or to disturb. It's very similar and has overlapping meanings with 弄. So instead of saying, is my computer fixed? 我的电脑修好了没有? 我的电脑搞好了吗? You can also say 弄好 in this situation too. So here's a good example sentence for this. 你能别搞弟弟吗? 搞弟弟, like just annoying your little brother. Don't annoy your little brother. So 搞 is such a broad term, but you get what it means in the context. And that kind of is a indication of a more casual word being used. The more specific word, and therefore slightly more formal word, would be 你能别折腾弟弟吗? Another meaning that's often used with 搞, that's specific to this word or character, is 搞定, which means to settle or resolve something. So the official word for resolve would be 解决, which would be classed more as like a slightly formal or just a standard neutral word. 这事儿搞定了. This matter is settled or resolved. The more formal way would be 这件事情解决了. 搞笑 is the less formal, more casual way of saying funny or humorous, whereas the more formal way is 幽默. 他很搞笑 or 他很幽默. Another word that's really common in Chinese but also distinctly casual in many situations is ge. Now, we call this the universal measure word. You may not be aware, but there are measure words in Chinese. So for specific objects or people or places or buildings, you use different measure words depending on what the thing is that you're talking about. So for example, a student would be 一名学生. 学生 means student, and 名 is the measure word for student. But if you just replace it with ge, it makes it more casual. And it's absolutely fine to do that. If you go into a restaurant, they'll often come up to you saying 几位, how many measure word for guests, right? Which is the more formal way of saying it. But in a more chilled out, casual restaurant, they might just say 你们几个人?你们几个人?几个人? So how many people, but with the 个 there to make it more broad and therefore more casual. Another super casual word is 啥 or what. Now, of course, the normal word, I can't say formal, but just a standard sort of neutral way of saying what is 什么. But if you want to sound more casual, then you would say 啥. 你找啥? You look for what. Another one would be 你叫什么名字? Or literally, you called what name? That's the normal way of saying it, and that's absolutely fine to use in the majority of situations. But again, if you want to sound more casual, you could say 你叫啥名字? Another super common character that you can just throw in there to make things more casual is 儿. Now, there's a phenomenon called 儿化, where you add the 儿 sound like a pirate to the end of a lot of words. This is more of a northern phenomenon, but it is technically standard Mandarin, and it's a way of sounding more casual all over China. So you can add the R to the end of flowers, for example. Instead of saying 花朵 or 花, you would say 花儿. So instead of saying 这里 for here, you would say 这儿 or 那儿 instead of 那里 for there. 这儿的花真美. Or instead of 这里的花朵 真美. Another really common one is 玩 instead of 玩, which means play or have fun. So those are the ways of sounding more casual. It's good to be aware of those words so that you can use them or avoid them depending on what situation it is. Now let's talk about what are the more distinctly formal versions of everyday Chinese speech. So you can either, again, use them when it's a more formal situation or definitely avoid them if it's not a formal situation so you don't sound weird. So let's start off with 用. 用 is to use in Chinese, and it's either casual or just neutral in meaning. Whereas the more formal version of it would be 使用, which is technically the full word for use in Chinese. That's a common thing you'll see. If you want to go more formal, often it's about extending to the full usage of the word. Another one is 怎么. 怎么 means how, and it's the either neutral or rather casual way of saying how. But to sound more formal, you would say 如何. 如何. So 如 means to resemble and 何 means what. To resemble what means how. So 你知道怎么用灭火器吗? Do you know how to use a fire extinguisher? That is standard Chinese, not particularly casual, just normal. But if you wanted to make that more formal, you would say 您知道如何使用灭火器吗? 您 is like the more polite, formal way of saying 你. Another really common formal version of a really common word is 非常 versus 极其. So they both mean exactly the same thing, extremely, but 非常 is the far more common standard / casual way of saying extremely, and 极其 is the more formal version. 数据安全对公司非常重要 or 极其重要. Now saying, as we already covered earlier, this or this one in Chinese is 这 or 这个 or 这 or 这个. By the way, 这 versus 这 is slightly more casual. 这个 or 那个, slightly more casual way of expressing this one and that one. But in really formal Chinese or even written Chinese, instead you would say 此 or 该. So instead of saying something like 这个项目没按时做完, this project did not finish on time or was not finished on time, you would say 该项目未能按时完成. Now there are several ways of saying but in Chinese. 但是, 不过, 可是, and they're all pretty standard / casual. But the formal way of saying but is 然而这手机挺好看的但是电池不耐用. This phone's quite good looking, but the battery is not durable. And the more formal version of this sentence might be 这手机外观不错. 外观 is the sort of outside appearance. It's a more formal / articulate way of expressing the same meaning as 挺好看的, looks good. 外观不错. 然而电池不耐用. 然而 but the battery is not durable. Another one is 还是 versus 仍然. So 还是 is the standard way of saying still happening, something is still going on, and 仍然 is the more formal version. So for example, 现在这个项目还是没新进展. As of now, this project has still no new developments. And you could also say 目前 for as of now. 目前 in front of the eyes, that's the more formal way of saying it. 该项目仍然没有新进展. That's the super formal way of expressing the same thing. 所以 and 因为 are often used as a pair. Instead of saying 所以, therefore, we could say 因此, and that is the more formal version. Instead of saying 因为, the standard way of saying because in Chinese, you could say 由于因为今天下雨，所以运动会要推迟了. The more formal version of this would be 由于今天下雨，因此运动会将延期举行. So you know, I had to change that a little bit. Instead of 要推迟了，将延期举行. 将 is another way of saying 要 that's much more formal. And 延期举行 is another way of more formally expressing the idea of delaying or postponing the 举行, the happening of an event. Another super common formal version of a very common word is 和 versus 以及. 我们公司买了好多东西. Our company bought a bunch of stuff. 有打印机、扫描仪和电脑. Got a printer, a scanner, and a computer. And to make this more formal, we could say 我们公司购买了许多设备. So our 公司, our company, instead of saying 买了, we say the full word, 购买了。许多is a more formal way of saying a lot or quite a few things. Instead of 好多, you could say 许多 to be more formal. And we also replaced 东西 with 设备. So 设备 means equipment, and it's just a way of being more specific. It's not necessarily formal in and of itself. So when you go more specific, it tends to automatically make it more formal. Whereas just saying 东西 means stuff or things, and it's more casual. 有打印机, 扫描仪, 以及电脑. So instead of saying 和电脑, you say 以及电脑. That's the more formal way. Now 和, as well as and, as in another thing, it can also be with, as in me with you or you with my company. And the way of saying that formally is 与我和你们公司没什么关系。我和你们公司 I with your company have no relation. I don't have any relationship with your company. And the more formal way of saying that is 我与贵公司。贵公司 is literally expensive company. It's a way of saying your company that's very formal as well. 无任何关联。无 is a really succinct formal way of saying 没有 no doesn't have any 任何关系。任何 could be considered a more formal way of saying 什么 as in anything. Here's another couple for you. 马上 is a really common way of saying immediately or right away. So 你等一下，我马上就到。You wait a second, wait a sec, I'll be there momentarily. 我马上就到。But a formal way of saying 马上 is 立刻。我立刻就到。And you could also say instead of 你等一下, you might say 您稍等。您 is the formal you, and 稍等 is the more formal way of saying wait a moment. 等一下 is informal, 稍等 is formal. 现在 is the more standard / casual way of saying now, and 目前 is the more formal version. 现在公司最大的问题就是没钱. Now, our company's biggest problem is we don't have money. But the more formal way of saying this would be 目前公司最大的问题是缺少资金. So again, we're sort of being more specific, more elaborate with our words, more articulate really, and that's how you make it more formal. Instead of saying 没钱, no money, you would say 缺少资金, lacking capital. So let's go ahead and see these new formal versus non-formal words in action so you can get a better idea of how to use them. Now, I originally wanted to prepare a script for you with the casual words or the normal sort of standard words and then just swap out the words for the more formal versions. But if you do that without changing the surrounding context, it just sounds weird. If you're going to use formal words, the context in its entirety does have to be formal. That's why in some of the example sentences that we've just been through, actually we had to change the context itself in order to match the new formal word. So in this upcoming article, we're going to do actually two articles, one from the perspective of a passenger and the other from the perspective of the news reporter or the newspaper reporting on this incident. And that will give you a more realistic context for both normal / casual speech and more formal speech. So first, here is this short account of what happened at the railway station from the point of view of the casual passenger. 我和朋友坐高铁离开成都时, so when my friend and I were leaving Chengdu by a high-speed train, 因为着急下车, because I was 着急下车, as in a rush to get off the train car. And then this 嘛 is that filler word that we talked about earlier that's more casual sounding. 所以我把随身带的行李和电脑都弄丢了. So as a result, or therefore, I lost my luggage and laptop. 我当时都急死了. Now, I added this in because this is a very casual way of saying very stressed out. That 死了 literally means to die, but it's used at the end of things to say extremely. So, for example, hungry is 饿, but super hungry, extremely hungry is 饿死了, hungry to death. Very casual. 电脑上的很多资料非常重要. A lot of stuff that I had on the computer was very important. 非常重要. which is a standard way of speaking. 我就去找了工作人员帮忙 I looked for a worker at the station to help me, and the 工作人员马上就打了司机的电话 and then the worker immediately 马上 I should have made that blue, shouldn't I? 马上打了司机的电话 called the driver of the train's number. 但是司机 the driver 说 he said 没有看到我的行李和电脑 He did not see my luggage or computer. 我也搞不懂 I don't understand 搞不懂 There's that 搞 again, the more casual way of saying 不明白 or don't understand something. My luggage 行李为什么就不见了 It's just not, I can't find it. 现在还是没傻现在 now 还是 still 没 no 啥 any 没啥没什么 not any new news 新消息 So that's the more casual way of saying everything. Let's look at the more formal version of this same story from the perspective of a news reporter. 某外国乘客 foreign passenger 某 means some as in a certain foreign passenger 与 that's the and or 和 with 好友 that's the shortened way of saying 好朋友 Sometimes to be formal you actually shorten the words 乘坐 is the longer version of to 坐 坐 is usually the more casual way of saying it 坐高铁离开成都时 as the passenger and his or her friend took the train to leave Chengdu 由于because 下车匆忙 in a rush to get off the train that's the slightly more formal way 匆忙因此 therefore that's the formal version of 所以随身携带的 so again the full word is 携带 usually we just say 带随身带的东西the stuff I took with me but here it's using the full word to be more formal 随身携带的行李以及 meaning and as in and another thing 行李和电脑行李以及电脑遗失 instead of saying 弄丢弄丢 the 弄 is the more casual way 遗失 is the more formal way 在了车上 on the car so left the luggage and 电脑 on the train 据该乘客称 so this is a very formal way of saying according to 据 is according to this remember 这个乘客乘客 is passenger and 称 is what they said basically 据该乘客称电脑上的 the stuff on the computer 许多资料许多 is the more formal way of saying many and then 资料 is materials or stuff on the computer like documents things like that instead of saying 非常 we're going to say 极其 so we're not saying 非常 for very we're saying 极其重要 as in extremely important but the more formal way of saying extremely important 该乘客 there's that guy again this passenger 向车站工作人员请求帮助 ask for help from the people that work at the railway station and the 工作人员 the people that work at the train station 立刻 as in 马上 like immediately but the more formal way 拨打了司机的电话 so usually we'd say 打电话打 means hit in Chinese but in this situation, we're going to say 拨打 we're saying the full word instead of the shortened version to make it more formal. 然而 so they called 拨打了司机的电话 means they called the driver's phone. 然而 is the formal way of saying but instead of saying 不过 or 但是 and 司机称 the driver said 没有看到该名乘客 so 该 is this and 名 is the measure word for passenger 乘客 whereas usually we just say 个这个乘客 would be absolutely fine or 这个人 this person 的行李及电脑及 is another way of saying 以及 or 和 or and 为何 is another way of saying why in Chinese a very formal way of saying why which is usually 为什么 for the sake of what 为什么 but 为何 is using the more formal what 和 means what in Chinese 行李会不易 而飞呢? How could the luggage fly without wings, which is a sort of 成语. Using these 4-character idioms like these is another great way of sounding more formal, but that is once you get a bit more advanced and start developing your vocabulary. You don't have to worry about using them right now, not in everyday speech. But words like 目前, meaning now, and 仍然, meaning still, are very useful and very common, and you'll be able to see them everywhere. Now, still, 没有, no 进一步的消息. New news. Now, I prepared a couple of really cool little articles comparing the casual/standard way of communicating all the words that I've just covered here, as well as the more formal version in a dialogue, which you can get by clicking the link below and downloading that. I didn't want to include it in this video because it's slightly more advanced and you do need a bit of a foundation in Chinese in order to follow along. And really the key to understanding the difference between informal and formal is understanding the groups of words used in each situation. And I've covered a huge chunk of those in today's video, but really it's more about understanding the particular words used in more casual and more formal situations and getting used to them and acquiring them through lots of practice and immersion. If you are not at the level yet where you can understand full dialogues and articles and even example sentences in Chinese with ease without the help of Pinyin or English, then you'll definitely want to check out our group of amazing courses, The Blueprint, which you can also see in the description there. But at the very least, I recommend you download the PDF for this, including all of the phrases and bonus dialogues, not just the text, but the audio files recorded in studio quality male and female audio. And when you do get hold of those downloadable audio files, just play them as much as you can, repeat after the audio or alongside the audio, and you will acquire these phrases, these informal words and casual words in no time. I've also included a couple of bonus dialogues for you, as well as all of the audio and text for today's example sentences and articles. Make sure to comment below if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next video.